Welcome to Kill the Cat. In this episode, we're looking at one of the best sequels of all time, Toy Story 2. We've covered a few sequels in our past episodes, and so decided to dedicate an entire discussion to how to write the perfect sequel. Spoilers ahead for Toy Stories 1 through 4, but now, on with the episode. Welcome to this episode of Kill the Cat. Today we are talking about Toy Story 2, another sequel.
We like sequels.
To go with our long list of sequels, yes.
We just did Paddington 2 in our last episode. But sometimes sequels have a lot to offer and sometimes they don't. And Toy Story 2 definitely does. So we're going to do an entire episode about how to write the perfect sequel, which I would argue Toy Story 2 is. And Toy Story, we're going to touch a little bit on 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah. I still haven't seen 4, so Kat's going to touch on 4, and I'm going to maybe touch on 3. To start off, let's just talk about sequels. Beyond the whole thing of like scripting and making a film, which is incredibly difficult, as anyone who has made any sort of film would tell you.
It's a miracle any film exists, to be honest.
Yeah. Doing a sequel in the scheme of making films is not as hard. You are building on characters and worlds that people already love and enjoy. I mean, if you're going to get greenlit, the audiences probably love and enjoy the films. Like, there's going to be a market for that. And so people want to see more already. So you come in with this advantage of like, oh, we're making something that people want.
There's less exposition, there's less character setup.
Yeah. But doing something new can actually be really tricky. And so you get a lot of sequels that just kind of are the same film in a different place.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about, like, Pixar tried this thing out for a while. They're like, oh, we're going to make a movie about the side character, which is how we got, like, Finding Dory and Cars 2.
But they were just rehashing the same thing from the first one. And that just kind of undercuts the lessons and, like, everything that the characters learnt in the first movies and what they had to overcome. And there's something to be said for the fact that when you design a world, you design it around your characters and what they need and what the journey they're about to go on.
Your theme. We love theme.
We
I feel
love
like everything
theme.
should come back to theme. Should we talk a little bit about, like, what did people love about the original Toy Story? Because it could have been gimmicky. It's the first, completely computer animated film.
Yeah.
But it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which, look, Rotten Tomatoes is not the greatest measure out there.
What? I don't know what you're
it's
talking
very biased in who is reviewing those movies. But generally, a movie with a 100% Rotten Tomatoes score is amazing. And Toy Story is one of them, and so is Toy Story 2. So what do people love about the original Toy Story? Okay, just super simple. Characters, we all know Woody and Buzz. Mm-hmm. And then we got like all the side characters. We got Mr. Potato Head. We got Rex. We got Slinky. And that core cast, with the exception of like Andy, I guess, doesn't change throughout the movies. Yeah. Every time we come back to them, Woody is the main character and he has the same people around him. We add people.
Yeah, and people get taken away.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is this setup that toys can interact in the world, but in a very like sneaky kind of heist-like way.
Yeah, well, because they can't reveal that they are conscious to the humans.
Yes.
And so everything they do ends up being something like a heist because they have to be sneaky. And I remember being a kid and watching Toy Story and loving the premise of like your toys are awake when you're not looking.
Yes.
And I don't know if you ever did this, but I did. The thing of like, you like go out of a room and then
I totally did that.
Open the door to try and see if you could catch them.
Like, are you alive? Are you really alive? But just the first the opening scene of Toy Story is them trying to spy on Andy's birthday party.
Yeah.
To see what presents, and it's like a military operation. They got the army guys. They got Woody's their general.
Yeah.
Radio contact and all the creative ways they're using the world. And that continues through all 4 movies. Like, that's a really fun setup. It's never the point of the movie, but it's there. There's kind of like a darkness to all the Toy Story movies, which I really enjoy. Like, there's Sid.
Yeah.
There's that horrifying like dream sequence in the second one where like Woody's getting thrown away.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
I had such nightmares. Yeah, there's the furnace.
In the third one, yeah.
That one, and then, even in the fourth one, there's, like, the ventriloquist dummies, and there's, like, body horror in the fourth one.
Well, I feel like even in Sid's one, there's a little bit of it. They don't lean too much into it, but it's like,
there.
If you think about it, it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, so that's all the things we love about Toy Story. We also love the theme and the message. We will get into that at a later point. So we take those and then we expand. How do we expand on the things that people already loved?
Well, I mean, first thing you do, you expand on the world, right? So one of the easiest ways to do that is to introduce new characters that people can love. So one of the differences between Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2, in Toy Story 1, you get the whole bedroom's worth of toys. You see a lot of their interactions. You see Woody interacting actually with most of them. In Toy Story 2, you get a little bit in the intro scenes, like the first few scenes, but it kind of comes down to just the main cast. And so you've lost a lot of the army guys. You see the monkeys briefly. You see Mr. Sketch briefly. Like, you get all the characters recurring, but they're just there for like a moment. And then you get the core cast who get to stay for the adventure.
And we get new characters.
We get Jessie, and we get Bullseye, and we get Stinky Pete, who's our new villain.
So yeah, and Jessie gets to stay. The rest of them, and so does Bullseye. They get to stay.
Barbie gets to stay for a little bit.
Barbie gets to stay. Yeah, and then the third one we get Ken, which is fun. And then in the fourth one, Bo Peep makes a return.
Yep.
We get some new allies. We get Duke Kaboom, played by Keanu Reeves. We get Ducky and Bunny, played by Key and Peele.
You get Forky.
We get Forky, of course, yes, we get Forky. Weirdest character. How am I alive? I don't know.
Yeah, so you expand your characters, and I think another important thing here is that they kind of expand and cut characters at similar rates. So, like, it would become a bit too much to keep all the old characters and bring in new characters. Like, you'd just be getting to a ridiculous size by the end of it. Avengers kind of pulled it off.
Yes.
There's a reason they pulled it off. That's a very different
But then you end up with, like, how much screen time did Steve Rogers get in Infinity War? It's something crazy like 7 minutes.
Are you serious?
7 minutes.
That feels wrong.
But
the other thing that grows is also then just the actual spaces that these things take place in.
And the interesting thing of like toys are alive. So we start with kids' toys and what that looks like. And then throughout the movies, they play around a lot with what is a toy and therefore what could be alive and what exists. So the second one adds the idea of a toy shop, but also the museum in Japan. And looking at those, the third is all about the toys in a daycare. And the fourth is all about lost toys. We also get like toys in the antique shop. So thinking about like where toys could exist and then having fun with those locations.
I mean, this is something that most sequels do, hopefully, is they move locations. But like going from Toy Story 1, where it's basically Andy's bedroom, by extension his house, Sid's house, and Pizza Planet.
Yeah,
and the trip to and from, and a little bit on the road at the end. Toy Story 2, you get Andy's room, you get Al's home, you get the toy shop, you get the elevator and vents in the high-rise going up to Al's home, and you get the airport, and then the plane and the baggage claim. So you get all these extra spaces that you didn't get before. Toy Story 3, then you've got Bonnie's house, you've got Andy's house, you've got the daycare center and the different areas of the daycare center.
The dump.
You got the dump, and then you've got the furnace, and you've got the conveyor belt going to the furnace as like a, fun little adventure moment. But it's like with each movie, they just expand the spaces that you're going to.
Yes. So, we also get a new villain.
Every time.
Yes. Not all sequels do this, but I like that Toy Story does. Each one, we get a new villain, and the new villain represents new theme, continuing theme. Okay, so when I did like the prep for this podcast, I actually watched 1 to 4 essentially back to back. I've never done that before.
Back to back to back to back.
Yes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I realized is that what Toy Story is really doing is we're following Woody's complete character arc. So this is why I said when like Woody is always the main character as opposed to like, oh, like Buzz is going to be the main character or like Jessie's now the main character. And I remember watching the fourth one and being like, it's kind of weird that like Jessie and Buzz and stuff aren't in it as much. But rewatching it, I think this was the third time I've seen the fourth one. I was like, oh, it's because their character arcs are complete. Woody's isn't. And we don't give Woody a new theme or a new character arc per movie. It's one big one over all 4 of them. And to me, that actually is what really, really makes an interesting sequel.
Yeah, so like Toy Story 1, Woody is learning to share Andy with other toys. Toy Story 2, Woody having to choose whether he commits to Andy or, acknowledges that Andy will one day grow up and leave him and, just calling that early and going to Japan instead. Toy Story 3 is then like, okay, Andy is grown up. Can I let go?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the answer is kind of no. So I remember like watching Toy Story 3 and being like, perfect ending. And I think a lot of people agreed with that. And then they announced Toy Story 4. And everyone were like, no, like the third one. And then going into the fourth one, I was like, no, this is the perfect ending for Woody.
Yeah.
It's devastating. It's really hard to swallow. Okay, also when I went into this watching them as a parenting analogy this time, which is in comparison a lot of people have made. It doesn't necessarily have to be a parenting analogy. There's other lessons to draw from it.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah, it works. So if we were going to look at parenting as the theme of Toy Story, and each movie says something new about parenting and it builds on what it's already said. This would be Woody's through line. So in the beginning, like Buzz represents, this could be like a new parent, like a step parent, it could be like a mentor. A new important adult has entered Andy's life. And Woody needs to learn that just because this new adult or parental figure has entered, it doesn't diminish his love for Woody. Number 2, Woody is now faced with the idea that Andy is going to grow up one day and he's probably not going to need him. So he's offered this out with the museum of like, you can go be like this remnant of like this famous cowboy. Side note, how charming is the Woody show?
It's so good. It's so good.
I was like, I totally watched that. If that was like an old TV show.
Yeah.
So he could go and essentially have this kind of immortality. But no one will ever love him. I think Stinky Pete uses the word adore, like kids will adore you, but they're going to come and stare at him through glass. And there's even a line where someone, I think the toy mender, which I love that scene, where he comes in.
Don't play it, yeah.
Don't play, like...
For display only.
Yes, he'll fall apart if handled too much. So Woody is then faced with the idea of if he chooses Andy, Andy is going to outgrow him, abandon him, he's going to lose him. And we know that's going to happen because we've seen it happen to Jessie. Yeah. And we've seen kind of Woody's future with Jessie. When Somebody Loved Me is a sad song.
Oh my God.
And like I said, I was going into this.
It's such a perfect thematic development from You Got a Friend in Me, right? Which is like the key song of the first one. But God.
And going into this as a parenting analogy, that was the first time I'd heard it as like a mother singing to her daughter.
Yeah.
Just to be the idea of like, one day your kid will grow up and not need you, and having to learn to accept that. And there's even a line in that where it's like, it's good while it lasts. That's what I mean by like, these movies are such like gut punches.
Yeah.
It gets worse. Keep going. Okay, Toy Story 3. The thing Woody dreaded in Toy Story 2 has happened, or is about to happen. Andy's going to college. So Woody's new choice is, do I follow Andy to college or do I stay with my friends? And Buzz and Jessie are really like pushing, like, it doesn't matter what happens to us as long as we're together. And Woody's like, I want you guys to be okay, but also Andy needs me. Andy needs me at college. And he realizes in the end, Andy doesn't need me anymore. And there's even like a scene where Andy says to his mum, I'll always need you, Mum. But Woody's watching that, and those words are really for him. So Woody lets go of Andy. So long, partner. And we just get Andy going, thanks, guys. Their job is complete. Their job was important, but it's done. Now he gets Bonnie. 4th movie. The answer to Woody's parenting arc is not, I now get a new kid. That's not how this ends for him. So in the 4th one, he's trying to do for Bonnie what he did for Andy. But he's not Bonnie's favorite toy. Woody's fine with that. It's not the first theme again. Woody's new job is keeping Forky safe because
he is the favorite toy.
Yes. So he really throws himself into, I'm going to make sure Bonnie has Forky, no matter what. And his growth is running back into Bo Peep, who is now a lost toy, and having the absolute time of her life being a lost toy. And in the first one, like, when he gets thrown out the window, it's him and Buzz, and he's like, I'm a lost toy, and it's like the most devastating thing that could ever happen to him. So through that movie, he has to learn that the thing he's done, essentially since the beginning of his existence, no longer matters. That's not his identity anymore. Andy's gone, Bonnie doesn't need him, so he gets to go live a life just for himself, full of self-fulfillment. And that's really about how parents need to reconsider their own identities after their kids have left the nest. So that was fun. So that's the ongoing thematic arc. And breaking down into that is like, what is the most interesting and poignant thing we can say about parenting? And then we get a different villain. You know, villains are good for theme. Who knew? So let's jump into the villain of the first one.
Well, the villain of the first one is Sid.
The key antagonist is Buzz.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so Buzz exists to challenge Woody's everyday normal. Like, he exists to throw things out of whack, to push Woody into this adventure and to push him into having to deal with this idea of, like, what if I'm not the favorite toy?
What if I'm replaceable? What if My kid abandons me.
Yeah. And then Sid is the villain who provides an actual threat of like, you may never see Andy again. You may get destroyed.
And then to add to that threat is, at some point, I really like the stakes of, we talked on like Emperor's New Groove, like buddy cop. And like that idea of you just need two people who don't get along but need to get to the same place.
Yep.
Which is what this is. What he's like, I can't go back without Buzz, even though Buzz is getting in my way.
Yeah.
So now I have to learn to work with him to get home, which is amazing. That's just solid screenwriting. And then you get to watch their friendship grow.
Yeah. I do love in the first one, Woody has to save Buzz, who loses his arm at one point.
Yes.
And then the second one, Buzz has to save Woody, who loses his arm pretty early on in the movie. And then in the third one, does someone lose their arm? Oh, in the third one,
Mrs. Potato Head
Miss Potato Head is missing her eye. Someone's got to be missing a limb in every movie.
Actually, in the fourth one, Bo Peep has like, she's still got her arm, but she has to like tape it and glue it on sometimes.
Oh, really?
Because she's made of porcelain and it's like snapped off.
Of course.
So she has to. Just a lot of Winter Soldiers going
Yeah.
on. That scene where Woody's like, can you give me a hand? And then Buzz throws his arm. I've seen that with like Sam and Bucky captions. And I love it.
Yeah, so Sid is the threat. In the second movie, Stinky Pete becomes the villain, I guess, of the movie, although you've got Al as the new kind of external threat.
But Pete represents...
Thematically.
Yes, what Woody's going to become. So, yeah, like it is a really... I had in my notes as well that like it's actually genuinely very high stakes for Woody to make that choice because it's not just about him. Like he bonds with his roundup really fast. And if he says no and goes back to Andy,
they go into storage.
They go into storage. And he's like, okay, so it's not just about him, it's about these people. Yeah, and he is really faced with that idea of if you go back, you're going to get lost, you're going to end up in the dump, you're going to experience a lot of heartbreak.
It's this inevitable pain that you know is going to come, or you could avoid it and actually help these people in the process, right?
Yes.
These toys that you love who are, he learns about Woody's Roundup and all this, like they're toys that he has this connection with.
Yeah, but if he does that, he'll never get played with or loved again. So it's kind of that idea of you can shut yourself off from love and like never have love again, but never be hurt again. Or you can let yourself have love, even though knowing it's going to come with really big
pain.
heartbreak and pain later. Which is a way of saying like all relationships are temporary. In a way, people drift away, people die.
Yeah.
Or, children grow up and don't need parenting as much anymore. That's going to hurt and you have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Don't become like Pete. And he gets sent away to get ruined by a little girl in the end.
The third movie, it's Lotso who is the villain, and he was replaced.
Yes.
And that is his thing, and he drags everyone else down around him, even though he was the only one who was replaced.
Yeah,
and it wasn't because his kid didn't love him, it was because he got lost.
Yes. And he never recovered from that pain. Continuing your thematic journey. All the villains are kind of what Woody could be, which is what great villains are, really. What the hero could be, or they really, really challenge that central idea the hero has, which is Batman Joker style. Yeah, so Lotso was in so much pain that he has now established a system that protects him constantly. So he throws all new toys to the caterpillar room.
Yeah.
So he can stay in the butterfly room safe. And there's this idea of like, if there's this constant stream of kids and you never really get attached to any one of them,
And then you never get hurt. Yeah.
This is a really weird analogy to make for like a kid's movie, but this made me think a little bit of like, I'm going to have casual sex forever and never a relationship. Because a relationship would hurt me.
Yeah.
But this is fun and, but if you really want a relationship, that's not the way to go about it. You have to risk being hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment where they're all like holding hands, ready to go into the furnace is so dark.
Oh my gosh.
And then the claw.
The claw.
Claw.
Great setup though.
Great setup and payoff. Hey.
Yeah.
Okay, so fourth villain is Gabby Gabby.
Gabby Gabby.
Gabby Gabby. Okay, so Gabby Gabby is essentially like an antique child stole. And she's been in this antique shop. So the reason she's after Woody is that she's broken. Her voice box doesn't work, but Woody's does. So she wants to rip Woody's voice box out, and there's like a surgery scene of this. It's really dark with like these creepy ventriloquist dummies, so it can be inserted into her so she can be fixed and be loved by a child. So that's Gabby's arc. So what happens is essentially in order to save Forky, Woody gives her the voice box. It is to say Forky, but it's also like an acknowledgement on Woody's part of, I've done my bit. I don't need this voice box anymore. I'm going to be okay. Gabby, you have this voice box. There's then a moment where like she gets the voice box and she gets rejected by the child anyway. Because she thinks once, you know, the pull cord works, this particular child who comes into the shop will love her. Doesn't. So what Woody does, only villain to get redemption in Toy Story, is he's like, come with me. There's this little girl called Bonnie. Bonnie's going to love you. I promise. On the way to go to get Bonnie, they run across another little girl who's lost her parents and is crying. And how they round off Gabby's arc is Gabby uses the voice box to get the little girl's attention. The little girl picks up Gabby Gabby and then has the courage to go find an adult. And that's Woody saying, I'm done. It's your turn. My turn is done.
Yeah, wow. What an ending.
So I'm running Toy Story 4 for you.
No, that's okay. I'm okay with that.
So, like, kind of like an example of what not to do I had for this is, in my notes I talked a little bit about the Shrek movies.
Yeah, I think for me, like, what I've come to realize in all of this is that sequels are really, you make or break them with your thematic questions. Like, if you're not continuing the story thematically, if you're not continuing the journey for the character, it's going to feel stale, it's going to feel flat. So we talked about this before, but like Shrek is a really good example of this, in that Shrek 1 is about love overcoming appearance. And so Fiona has to go through the journey of accepting herself as an ogre and being loved that way, rather than trying to get married super quick just so she can stay human. And then Shrek 2 challenges that by putting them in a world where there's other people around, and it puts them both in human form for a while. And it
gives them the temptation, you can stay this way. Yeah. Fiona's parents approve of them more. And it's kind of hinting like, if you are these beautiful people, you will have an easier life. And they pay that off. Same theme as the first one, just stronger. Which is, appearance overcomes love. We're going to be ogres together and you guys have to like accept us for who we are. And the good guys do.
And then the third movie does something.
Fiona gets pregnant and Shrek has to travel with Justin Timberlake to like learn how to be a dad in time for Fiona to have. That's not continuing the thematic point of the first two.
And then who even remembers what Shrek 4 was?
I think Rumpelstiltskin was in it. That's literally all I remember.
That's right.
I don't remember what the theme was. They have the babies at that point. So I get the temptation to be like, it was getting together. It was marriage and honeymoon. Now we're going to talk about kids.
But the problem is that's continuation of plot, not continuation of theme.
Yes. So what we really want to see is more interesting elaborations on character arc and journey. This is a positive growth arc. We're going to talk a little bit in a future episode about like Captain America movies and how they really push like who Steve Rogers is as a person. And this is why The Winter Soldier is so great.
One of the things you could have done as well with Shrek 3, right? Or Shrek 4, or, you know, having the kids around is like maybe the next thematic step is Shrek now needs to deal with other people having to go through that journey. His kids have to go to fairy tale school or something. That. And they're getting bullied because they're ogres. And he has to deal with that as a parent of like, you know, I can't just scare people away because that's just buying into the ogre-ness issue. How do I go through the like, it doesn't matter what you look like, it's okay.
That's a much better movie.
Thank you.
Because he's fine with it. Fiona's fine with it. They proved that. Now they have to learn how to live with...
It's different stakes when it's your kids who have to be fine with it.
Yeah, and now it's their kids who have to learn that lesson, but they want their kids to be happy as well.
We're just here rewriting Shrek. It's okay.
I feel like that's a pretty good rewrite. I remember watching Shrek 3 after learning that my dog was going to be put down and I needed meaningless background noise. So I haven't been able to watch that movie since. Not that I would probably want to anyway. But it just makes me think of my first dog who died. That's the theme of that movie for me. So, yeah, it's that idea of, I won't do my whole speech about Frozen 2, but, like, Frozen 1 is about Elsa not isolating herself and, like, being who she is. And then in the second movie, she goes off into the forest and isolates herself.
Yeah, I think that's the worst you can do for a sequel. I mean, not the worst, but just, like, when you make your character do the same thing again.
Yeah, like, this is what people liked in the first one.
But it's like, your character has learned a lesson. Acknowledge that.
Okay, another thing I like about Pixar is not everything gets a sequel.
Because not everything needs a sequel.
I love there's no Inside Out 2. Because what would you
do?
Pixar could come up with something amazing. But that did its theme really well, and we walked away from the theme. Soul destroyed me. It destroyed my spirit and ruined my life.
Destroy your soul?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it destroyed Cat Soul, did the movie named Soul. Which was actually like my takeaway, which was just have something really interesting to say. Again, that sounds so basic.
But it's not. Like, we've touched on this so many times, the idea of, like, theme.
And people send, like, I get a lot of scripts which are about, like, really important topics, like abuse or depression. It's not a theme. You need to have something interesting and original to say about that.
Yeah.
I read so many scripts where it's just like, sorry, quick trigger warning for like domestic abuse, but like where someone is like abused and then they get like rescued at the end, or they go to like a help center. I'm like, that's great that you showed them getting help, but that's not a theme. You need to find something like interesting to say. And when I say interesting, I don't just mean gimmicky.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things that I always would lean away from in films that I worked on, or if I ever worked on a film with the director, I would tell them to change it, is when people use people who are homeless in their films. Because I'm just like, for me, I worked in homelessness for a while, but it's just like, it's gimmicky and it's exploitative and it's just kind of tacky. And you're not actually adding to the story. What you're trying to do is take the shock value of,
shock value. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't do it for shock value.
Yeah. Shock value and theme are very different things.
Yes. Or taking an important topic and saying that's your theme. It's not.
It's not. No. It's a topic, and if you don't have good theme underneath it, if you don't have good lessons to be learned by someone, if you don't have something to overcome beyond just the physical element of like fighting whatever, oppressive force you're making your film about, it's going to fall flat. It's going to be tacky and just feel like, for me, when I watch films like that, it feels kind of gross. Like, I feel icky because I'm like, I've been put in a situation where I'm engaging with this subject matter or this topic and nothing of substance has been said about it.
Yeah, it's like, so those domestic abuse tips, usually like, domestic abuse is bad and you should go to a shelter. Awesome, great, that's good, but that's not what your theme or your message should be. It should be a more nuanced way of getting that across. And this is actually what write what you know means. Sometimes that's interpreted as like, write about your real life experience, or you can't write like fantasy or sci-fi. But I find definitely like my best writing is a lesson I've personally learned, potentially in therapy, because we should all be in therapy. And I'm like, that was like my positive change arc. So now I'm going to find, like, my first script was all about, in a way, essentially about like overcoming hustle culture to give back to your community instead of constant improvement. But that was like a sci-fi dystopian world. Yeah. But that's what my theme was, because I felt like I had something to say about that, because I'd experienced that. And Toy Story is not just about how to be a great parent. It's about the pain that comes with being a parent that isn't really talked about a lot.
Yeah. It uses nuance to explore something very real. And I think with themes as well, you've got to get really specific, right?
That's what Pixar does. Like, Inside Out is all about how sadness has value. That's what that is. And for a long time, that movie was about happiness and fear. And then they realized they didn't have anything they wanted to say about fear. Yeah. So they swapped out fear with sadness, and how sadness can be healing. And how we should experience sadness and not just push it away to be happy all the time. And
you can then build your world around that, right? Like, the external world for Riley, I think it is in Inside Out, is that she's moved and she's got no friends where she's just moved to, and they don't play hockey there. And she's got all this stuff that she's dealing with, as well as sort of becoming an adolescent. And it's like, oh, like you're all over the place anyway. Life is super up and down, and you're actually she's struggling to maintain any.
And her
sort
parents are just being like, oh, can you just put a smile on, be our happy girl, we know this is really hard, but like, just keep happy for us, okay?
Yeah, that's a great world to build around what ultimately is the most important part, and that's the theme, and it's okay to be sad sometimes.
Which, just to contradict that, think about the Emoji Movie. There might be a theme, I haven't seen it. I think there's a very basic theme about like breaking out of your mold, which we've seen before. And the reason I say like Soul destroyed me is because Soul is all about, if you're any kind of artist or creative, you could achieve your dream, you could create the most wonderful masterpiece ever, and you won't be complete. You won't be happy. And if you dedicate your life to your craft, you are wasting your life because you need to focus on the little good things around you, which is really hard for some creatives to hear. And not the message we get in the industry at all.
No, because creative culture is all about like, I think back to film school and I think to life trying to push in film, which at this point I've hit a point where I'm like, actually, I don't think that's what I'm going to go for anymore. Purely because like the culture is you need to give it everything. You need to be willing to be mistreated and, you know, work for nothing.
Wreck your body, you can't sleep.
Work 14-hour days for, you know, a pizza lunch because you love the art. And it's like, well, why should I love it this much?
It's really like pushed into you that you can't have another life. I actually
You can't be successful and have another life.
Yes, and that's really unhelpful. I actually had a really good chat to someone from Tumblr, actually, who worked on West Side Story and John Wick 3. And she said the people at the top are essentially as miserable as all the people on the indie shoots. And hello, by the way, if you're listening. But she essentially said, I will link her article in the show notes if she gives me permission to do that. Yeah, it's just, and it wasn't worth it, and she walked away.
I feel that.
This got a little off topic, but I do feel like this is really important to talk about. And when I say have an interesting theme and have something to say, like Soul like changed my life. That's why I said when it like ruined me. I don't know how Toy Story is going to hit for you when you when that baby is here.
Yeah.
And we're doing A Quiet Place soon as well, which is all about parenting as well.
What have you done, Kat? I feel like you've
targeted you. Yeah, essentially the theme of Toy Story, if you're going to come at it from like a parenting angle, is like parenting is really hard and really heartbreaking. And one day your kids aren't going to need you, but it's worth doing anyway. And if you don't want to look at it as a parenting analogy, any kind of relationship, any kind of risk.
Any kind of love.
Yes.
Right? There's risk, and that's what makes it special. That's what makes it important.
Yes. And if you want to write the perfect sequel, you take that theme and you find the next interesting thing to say about it and the next interesting step for your protagonist to take because we're always growing as people.
That's a great place to end.
I think it is. Until the sequel. No.
That was our episode on Toy Story 2 and how to write the perfect sequel. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, make sure you click follow or subscribe on whichever platform you're on. And if you have the time, leave us a review or tell a friend. It helps us grow the show and bring you even more like our upcoming episodes on A Quiet Place, Phineas and Ferb, and a very special event that we have planned coming up soon. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, so feel free to say hi and share your thoughts. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat.
There's a snake in my boot. That was my attempt at a cowboy accent. It was bad.